Welcome to the 700 Club. Here's a quote for you. Give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster. That's Prime Minister Netanyahu's message to President Biden. He's blaming the White House for holding up arms sales to Israel.
Well, the administration claims it's not stalling any shipments. Yet one Republican leader says the president is playing politics with Israel's security. CBN's Julie Stahl has more.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he thanked U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken for U.S. support during his recent visit, but also mentioned a holdup in weapons.
I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies.
Blinken admits the U.S. briefly held up one shipment of weapons, but says others are in process and said the U.S. is committed to Israel's security.
We have a commitment to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself against a whole variety of threats. Gaza is part of it, but it far surpasses Gaza in terms of the threats they face.
Behind the scenes, the White House reportedly is furious over Netanyahu's comments. Axios reports it canceled a high-level meeting with Israeli officials over long-term Iran policy. However, the Wall Street Journal reports a holdup in the sale of 50 F-15 fighter jets approved last month. Some Democrats in Congress are pressuring the president to withhold U.S. weapons to force a peace deal. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is blaming election year politics for interfering with Israel's right to defend itself.
It needs the freedom to operate on its own timetable, based on tactical reality in the Middle East, not on the political winds in Washington.
Netanyahu says if Israel has what it needs, the war will go faster.
During World War II, Churchill told the United States, give us the tools, we'll do the job. And I say, give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster.
The controversy happening as Israel faces an increased threat from Iranian-backed Hezbollah on its northern border. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein traveled from Israel to Beirut as he meets with officials in an effort to prevent an all-out war between the two sides. Tuesday, Hezbollah released drone footage showing targets deep inside Israel, including Haifa Bay, and military targets in civilian areas in what Israelis see as a clear signal of its intentions. Meanwhile, the IDF says its top generals in the north approved its operational plans for an offensive in Lebanon against Hezbollah. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, it's unfortunate this war has just begun. Hamas kicked it off on October 7th. If they would only surrender, if they would only release the hostages, then Israel will absolutely stand down in Gaza, and this thing could end today. But then, in southern Lebanon, the UN has completely wasted its opportunity to keep that safe zone. That was part of the deal when Israel withdrew from southern Lebanon, that the UN would make sure there aren't any weapons there. Well, we're clearly seeing there are a lot of weapons there. They're all being used by Hezbollah, and the UN is doing nothing. What do you expect Israel to do? It has to defend its territory. We need to stand with Israel. In other news, parts of the U.S. are suffering under sweltering heat, and firefighters are battling multiple blazes in the West. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. The National Weather Service in Caribou, Maine, issued the first excessive heat warning in its history. The heat index in the town near the Canadian border is expected to hit 105 degrees today. From Maine to Mississippi, 70 million Americans are trapped under a heat dome. Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Nashville are all forecast to see record highs in the coming days. Doctors are warning patients that some blood pressure medicine and antidepressants can lead to dehydration. The heat index in Phoenix is so intense that medics are carrying ice cocoons, bags to immerse victims in ice and quickly lower body temperatures.
We see the calls firsthand. Once you get heat stroke, it is too late. It is literally one of the #1 killers across the country.
Meanwhile, the hot and dry conditions are fueling at least 19 wildfires in New Mexico. One person died and thousands fled after fire damaged or destroyed at least 500 buildings in the mountain village of Ruidoso. Crews in California are gaining more control over the post-fire near Los Angeles. Well, here in Washington, the Congressional Budget Office is releasing troubling predictions on the national debt. As government spending outpaces tax revenues over the next decade, the CBO predicts the debt will exceed $56 trillion by 2034. The cause? Increased spending on Social Security and Medicare combined with high interest rates. The annual budget deficit is predicted to expand to $2.9 trillion over the next decade. This year's deficit is projected at $1.9 trillion. Well, another blow to the Biden administration's new rule extending Title IX protections to LGBTQ students. A second federal judge has put the rule on hold in several states. A U.S. district judge in Kentucky called the changes, quote, arbitrary in the truest sense of the word. The decision blocks implementation in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. That decision comes just days after another federal judge blocked the measure in Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, and Idaho. The rule is being challenged by more than 20 Republican-led states. Well, gender identity and religious freedom were behind a major court case in Colorado Tuesday. For the second time in a decade, Christian baker Jack Phillips appeared before the state Supreme Court. Small business owner who refuses to make cakes with messages that violate his beliefs says he's being targeted. CBN's Lori Johnson has the details.
Christian baker Jack Phillips is once again facing judgment from the Colorado Supreme Court. The case is over his refusal to make a gender transition cake, which his attorney argues is protected by freedom of speech and religion.
Phillips serves all people. He just can't express every message.
Plaintiff Autumn Scardina's attorney John McHugh argues there was no message. Scardina requested a pink cake with blue icing, but no writing or image to celebrate a transition from male to female. Lower courts ruled Phillips refused to serve Scardina based on his customer's identity, constituting discrimination.
Mr. Phillips is being asked nothing more than to do what he has repeatedly said he will do for other customers, which is specifically make a pink cake with blue icing. The testimony and the finding was he would gladly make that cake for other customers.
Outside the courthouse, Phillips said even without writing or a design, a gender transition cake sends a message.
Whether we create a custom cake always depends on what the message the cake will express is, never on who requests it. This means that I will not create a custom cake expressing any message that violates my religious beliefs, regardless of who asked for it.
It may be months before the Colorado Supreme Court issues its opinion. If it's in Phillips' favor, the case will be over. If it's against him, Phillips and his Alliance Defending Freedom attorney intend to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they've been before arguing a similar case. In 2019, the High Court ruled in Phillips' favor by saying the state of Colorado acted with clear and impermissible hostility toward his religious beliefs when he refused to create a custom cake for a same-sex wedding.
Over the last 10 years, Colorado officials and activists have tried to punish me for my religious beliefs. They have even tried to change my beliefs.
In 2023, the Supreme Court also ruled in favor of another Colorado Christian artist charged by the state. Lori Smith, a graphic designer who refused to create wedding websites for same-sex couples, was on hand Tuesday offering support.
Like Jack, I have received several death threats, continued harassment. The cost has been both professional and personal.
Both Smith and Phillips say they routinely serve people who identify as LGBT, but draw the line when asked to create something that violates their conscience. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thank you, Lori. Gordon, back over to you.
Well, it looks like Jack Phillips has some kind of target placed on him. And here, underlying the facts, the one asking for the cake is a lawyer, and so it's a setup. trying to say, okay, where does this limit happen? You could take a case all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can rule that, no, there's freedom of expression. You can't require someone to do something against their fundamental beliefs. You just can't do that. That's not part of freedom of conscience and religion in America. But they keep coming back, and it's just absolutely amazing to me that the court system seems to tolerate it. It just seems to be bullying to me, and I just wish it would finally end. But again, it's probably going to take the Supreme Court ruling yet again, and it's always on a case-by-case basis. The left always takes advantage of it, and there's a new phrase in our culture today. It's called lawfare, where instead of warfare, we're going to take you to court again and again and again and again and try to beat you down.